good and bad, has a long, rich history. Archaeologists have discovered numerous examples of ancient advertising, including a 3,000-year-old Babylonian sign depicting wine for sale. Ads dating from the 1st century AD have been found on the walls of Pompeii, hailing political candidates, theater performances, sporting contests, and even taverns. And then there were the criers. Walking, talking advertisements. In the days of ancient Greece, criers were seen heralding the arrival of ships from far-off shores, enticing crowds with a list of wondrous and exciting goods. Often they'd be accompanied by musicians, producing the first commercials. By the Middle Ages, a merchant class was beginning to emerge, but for the most part, people remained illiterate, limiting advertising to signs and criers.
We have residuals of this in the 3-ball sign of the pawn shop or the barber pole. These are vestiges of advertising which essentially turned attention toward what the product was, getting shaved or selling goods.
In 1448, an invention came along that transformed society. Its impact on advertising would be monumental. Enter the Gutenberg Press. Though the Chinese had already been printing with movable type for more than 1,000 years, Johann Gutenberg's invention set in motion a printing revolution throughout Europe.
The more people became literate and the more they started looking for goods and services and not just living in their own little huts and collecting at their own food, the more need there was for advertising.
With the rise of Gutenberg and the printing press, things dramatically shift. And now what is advertised, oddly enough, first great subject of advertising is books.
The first printed English-language advertisement appeared in 1480, the brainstorm of one William Caxton. Noticing the leftover paper from a book of religious verse he was preparing, Caxton made signs promoting the book's availability. Printers throughout Europe were suitably impressed with the idea. Soon, bills selling all kinds of goods, like tobacco and tea, began appearing. Eventually, the bills became so numerous on the streets of London that competitors tore down each other's ads. The practice led to the first advertising code in history. Printers agreed that ads could remain posted for 2 weeks. The printing press enabled advertising to conquer the streets of London, merely the first victory on its way to dominating all mass media with its messages to buy, buy, buy. Coming up, newspapers and magazines provide a new outlet for advertisers' pitches. Sell and Spin, a history of advertising, will return right here on the History Channel. We now return to Sell and Spin, a history of advertising, here on the History Channel. Every day, on countless doorsteps, the morning paper arrives, delivering a bombardment of advertising, and not just the news.
The average consumer has come to expect that there'll be advertising in whatever medium he or she is turning to look for news or entertainment or information.
Newspapers first regularly appeared in the 17th century, without ads. These simple one-sheet affairs were crowded print on scrap paper. Their potential to sell was yet to be realized. It was in 1625 that the first known newspaper ad appeared in England. Though the idea was slow to catch on, newspapers would soon become the first medium conquered by advertisers.
Newspapers were significant in the development of what we consider modern-day advertising because they were mass media. And what they did was make available an endless amount of space for advertisers to sell their brands, to promote their brands.
The advertising before the late 19th century, for the most part, could be considered announcement. Local retailers or merchants would announce the availability of their goods. They might throw in a superlative or two to encourage people to come to shop.
Newspapers arrived on the doorstep of the New World in 1704 with the publication of the Boston Newsletter. Its third issue was a milestone in advertising history, publishing the first ads to appear in the Americas. The next advance in advertising came from none other than Benjamin Franklin, who founded the Pennsylvania Gazette in 1728. Franklin was the first to use illustrations in advertisements to better catch the eye of the consumer. By the middle of the 18th century, most newspapers relied on advertising for profits. While newspaper publishers gladly accepted advertisers' money, many continued to believe that advertising was beneath them.
The gatekeepers of print never wanted to muddy the purity of what they were doing with commercialism. In newspapers, ads were confined to small spots where the same kind of font was being used.
Faced with these restrictions, advertisers made the jump from simple announcements to more creative methods of attracting attention.
One thing they would do is repeat a message. This was the forerunner of early advertising slogans as we know it today. They would take a one-line message and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it.
For businesses that wanted to advertise outside their hometown, there was no easy path. Volney B. Palmer, the son of a newspaper publisher, filled this void, setting up his shop in Philadelphia in the early 1840s. Palmer's simple plan created a whole new industry, the advertising agency.
He was an agent of newspapers. He would go out and try to recruit advertisements from businesses and was paid a commission by the newspaper. And this was the initial role of advertising agents, that they were essentially working for the publishers.
Soon, advertising agencies were opening across the country. Some of today's largest agencies, such as the J. Walter Thompson Company, can trace their roots back to this era. But these agencies were still limited to placing the ads, not writing them.
Normally, the business that was advertising would scribble something on the back of an envelope, say, and have it brought down to the newspaper or sent over to the magazine.
Magazines first opened their pages to advertisers in the post-Civil War era, providing the national exposure that manufacturers craved.
Beyond that, the format was very conducive to beautiful advertising and color advertising when the advertiser could afford it.
One early magazine publisher who eagerly pursued advertising revenue was Cyrus Curtis.
He introduced the Ladies' Home Journal, and he seemed to have the right mix of fiction, fashion, articles that appealed to women, but also his magazine was created solely as a vehicle for advertising.
Businesses had national magazines in which to advertise their products, and a national railroad system to distribute them. But they still needed some way to make their product stand out, to make their product more desirable than all the others. The solution? Branding.
When you were selling biscuits, for instance, in the 19th century, you would sell the biscuit in a barrel. On the barrel, you would burn the address of where the biscuits came from. The history of advertising is the transformation of that burned brand from the package to the product. So that when you pick up an Oreo cookie, for instance, you can actually hold it and look at the Oreo brand literally on the cookie.
The idea is not so much to attract individuals to try it so much as to make them into selective customers who say, I want that particular pack of cigarettes or that particular bottle of beer or that particular bar of soap.